Yeah, it is demanding, um, but and we are
Susie, could you let us know when we're live?
Speakers are able to join remotely via Teams. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded on the Council's YouTube channel, which is available for public viewing. I just have a few housekeeping announcements before we start. Evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to the right of this meeting room, and stand at the assembly point 9. This is outside the area beyond the fire exit. On arriving at this meeting, you should have read the emergency evacuation procedure and signed the fire register. Please inform the Democratic Services officer if you have not. For those joining remotely, when you're not speaking, please ensure your microphone is muted and your camera is off. Please can everyone ensure that their mobile phone, telephones, and any other devices are switched to silent during the meeting. As a modern council, both officers and members will be using their electronic devices throughout the meeting. If councillors wish to speak or participate in the debate, please raise your hand and I'll call on you when it's your turn to speak. After every agenda item, where required, there will be time for questions, then debate, and if a vote is required or there's a recommendation from this committee, I will need a proposer and a seconder, and the vote will then take place. So they're my announcements. So if we go to the next item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence.
We've had apologies for absence in Councillor Kent Arlett, and we've also had apologies from Councillor Catherine Keats-Rohan, and we've got Councillor Sue Cooper, who's with us today as a substitute member for Catherine.
Very much. And you want to give a quick roll call of the officers we've got here?
Officers, we have with us Simon Hewings, who's our Head of Finance and Lead Officer for the meeting. And online, I can see we have Anna Winship from Finance. We have Adriana Partridge, who's Scrutiny Lead Officer. And we've got Nick Bennett, who's our Head of Legal and Democratic, who I can see on the screen. If there's anyone else, I'm sure we will speak to them as the agenda items happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Candida. The next item, which is 3, which is minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 5th of November 2024. What I'll do is I will just page through them. If there's any questions or comments or any points of accuracy, then please raise your hand. So on page 1 of the minutes, page 2, page 3, and finally page 4. Any questions, comments? I see none. I'm happy to propose those minutes. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Powell. All in favour? Thank you. Next item is declaration of interest. To receive declaration of disposal of pecuniary interest. So if anyone's got any conflicts of interest on any aspects of the agenda, please say so now. Is there any conflicts? Any declaration of interest? I see none. We'll move on. Next item, number 5, is urgent business. I have no urgent business to announce, so we'll move on. And number 6, public participation. Do we have anyone registered?
No one's registered.
Okay, thank you. And then on to item 7, which is the work schedule and dates for all South Scrutiny meetings, and that's on your report papers on pages 8 to 10. So Candida, do you want to just quickly introduce this?
Well, I'm just wondering if anyone has any questions first. Should we go with that?
Yeah, any comments or questions?
On the work plan.
On the work?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Yes. Barlow.
Thank you. The first question I had was about the procurement strategy that we have had on the work plan in the past. And we've been asking for it to come to scrutiny since July 2023. I think it's a pretty important thing for us to scrutinise, and I wonder what is behind it dropping off, because I, for one, would like it to go back on.
Okay. Is there faster?
Simon, did we get a response?
Yeah, Simon.
I can pick that up. So in terms of the council, in terms of the officers refreshing the procurement strategy, we have been waiting for council plan to be finalised. Obviously, the council plan is now finalised. However, in light of the work on LGR, you know, which affects lots of things, it's not clear what you know where refreshing strategy, sort of the current strategy, would fit in. So it's something that officers will take away and consider.
Can I clarify?
Yes.
Was it about refreshing it, or was it just looking at? Because I'm not sure we've actually looked at the strategy full stop. So I wasn't particularly concerned if it was a new one or just looking at the current one that we have. And I made a mistake. I'm happy for other members to correct me.
From memory, I mean, obviously we introduced the strategy hasn't been refreshed since it was introduced. I can't recall off the top of my head whether Scrutiny was involved in looking at it when it was done. We can check that, but I have a feeling it clearly if Scrutiny looked at it at the point at which it was implemented and there hasn't been a change, wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for Scrutiny to see it again. But I think we'll take that away as officers and check the history.
And if you come back, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Councillor Rawlings.
Yeah, I take all the point that's being made about local government reorganisation, but I think my view would be the fundamental question is: are we never going to do any more procurement? And that answer to that is probably no. We are going to do some procurement, and therefore it would be okay to have a provisional review, which might say as a tagline, subject to LGR, and whatever might come out of that.
Okay. Nick, you come on screen. Would you like to make a point?
If I may, Chair, thank you. So the other thing which has been happening and is imminent is the changes to the procurement regulations, and they're going to be quite wide-ranging, and those changes will also impact upon the strategy which all councils are required to have. So I should probably take the blame for this. I think I have mentioned to colleagues in recent months that we need to be quite cautious about undergoing change to that until some of the further guidance that's going to be drawn up by national bodies in respect to procurement is done. So just to say, if we are going to, if your committee is going to do that, you're probably going to need to leave it 2 to 3 months as a minimum, so that we can get the new regulations which are coming out later this month on board, see what the guidance is saying, and see how the practical implementation of it will go. That probably fits in fairly well with the LGR stuff that Simon's mentioned already, but just an observation on the timescale, Chair.
Councillor Rawlings, has your question been answered?
I think we should book it in. Taking that on board, I think we should book it in provisionally. I think we should work towards that.
Councillor Morgan and then Councillor Powell.
Just one small thing. I think 116 to 120, the Broadway should be Robin and not Georgina, as cabinet member.
Yeah, I will correct that. Thank you.
And just before I Councillor Powell, just on that particular point, obviously this has been on the agenda for a while. Are we sure that the reports can be coming in that next meeting on particular 116 to 120 Broadway?
Can I just check, does Adriana want to speak to that, or shall I answer?
Good evening, councillors. Yes, I can speak to that. So I've been in touch with the relevant senior officers, and they've confirmed that the update on 116, 120 won't be in a position to come forward in March, the March scrutiny meeting. An ICMD is currently being progressed in relation to demolition, which is deemed necessary from health and safety reasons, but an update will come to scrutiny as and when ahead of any main contract award for the build. So that's the update from senior officers on that item.
Just before I move on to Councillor Powell, Councillor Bennett, you come on. Do you want to ask a question or comment on this particular item?
Yeah, I was just commenting on the Broadway project. I know it's also going to be coming forward for planning soon, so I don't know whether that affects when you're able to look at it.
Okay, well, I'll ask the officers to come back on that in terms of the workload and the programme. Councillor Powell, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. And it occurred to me as I was reading through the budget papers, actually, with the mentions of the references to Capita, and given that the original Capita contract ends this year, isn't it, in 2025? And I know we've extended
Mm.
elements of it, but I wonder at some point, I think it'd be good for Scrutiny to just have a report on the exit of Capita and some kind of analysis of you know, the say well, obviously we're doing it for a reason. Have we been justified? You know, were those upheld? Are there savings factored into our future budgets as a result of coming out of capital arrangement? I think it's just a bit of a wash up of where we've got to with Capita would be quite helpful for us.
That we can take that away. I mean, the one thing I would say is obviously we don't come out of that until September.
Yeah, no. So this is for
this is
I think
Parliament's
some
time.
time off. Yeah.
I've noticed we've got Gateway on here as one of the reports coming forward. So what we'd like to do in terms of going forwards, because obviously I'm going to put that back or keep it on the work program.
I think the update is that the Didcot Gateway project will need to be reviewed once the devolution and local government reform timeline is known. The officers have confirmed that currently they are proceeding with seeking a planning decision. So we can keep this item under review.
Okay. There's quite a lot here. I've got Councillor Rawlings and Councillor Barlow.
Just to check, the Cornerstone update is coming, and the note here is a bit vague. We've never had a business plan, we've never had financials, we've never had a detailed marketing plan or an HR staff plan, and all of those things were what we hoped for and asked for at a previous meeting. So I'm hoping we will see those, and I don't think that's an item that should be deferred, LGR or otherwise.
I'm hoping.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that comes forward because it has been asked a few times, and it's been requested for a while. So, Adriana.
Yes, I can confirm that is coming to the next scrutiny meeting. That is confirmed.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see the ICB the Integrated Care Board partnership on the plan. In the purpose document, it's talking about what we might specifically want to discuss there. And I thought about two things. One is the way in which the SIL funding is actually used for preventative health care, to look at about how that has a long-term impact on things and how they actually use their money, and then that's their more broad strategy and how these things line up with our council plan. So it felt like a really interesting exercise for us to do, is understand how SIL spends the money and how that links with our council plan.
Okay, is that something that can be done?
We'll take that away as officers and consider.
Yeah, if you can send an email around so we know. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Turner.
Following on from that, Chair, if we could have some sort of analysis of where we are with SIL spend. Of course, SIL has to be spent within 5 years, I believe. Otherwise, it goes back to the contractor.
I'm not aware of, to be honest.
It's true to parish.
For parishes, no, yeah, I press it for parishes. But do we have any analysis of lost SIL money amongst the parishes and towns?
I don't think that'd be for us to cover, to be honest. I mean, clearly, I don't think that's an issue for us to do.
Yeah, it's not our remit, is it?
It's not our remit.
Okay.
But they leave it with us, I think, if they're not.
No, sometimes they choose to leave it with
Yeah.
us if they haven't got a scheme or for other reasons, but lots of parishes we do pay it straight over.
If we can focus on our responsibilities and agreement, that'd be great. Adriana, you come back on screen. You want to come back in?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to refer to the Section 106 Affordable Housing Grant Process Review. I believe it's on the South Scrutiny work plan in terms of your committee pack, but it is confirmed to come to the joint scrutiny meeting on the 25th of February. So that amendment needs to be made to the work programme.
Okay, thank you. We'll make a note of that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Councillor Barlow.
We talked before as well about scrutinising OCC's use of SIL and how they use their SIL receipts, and again seeing how well in line they are with our council plan. And I requested that was put back on the agenda as well.
Again, I think we'll have to ask the officers to come back on that, because these are all great ideas and great reports, but I'm also conscious of the workload on the officers, and looking at the work schedule there is quite packed. So you can come back to us and with a realistic time plan.
Yeah.
Chair, is it okay if I add as well? You're looking at a scrutiny review actions report tonight as well, and part of that is forming a task and finish group. So all these ideas can feed into and you can prioritize. And so, you know, we're taking action there to get the work program in, you know, up to scratch.
We can put it on priority order.
Yes.
No, I understand. Any other comments before we make a note based on the feedback that people are given and some of the changes? Any other comments, questions? Okay, Candida, hopefully you got those feedback from the committee and you'll make the necessary amendments.
Yeah.
We are here to note the scrutiny work programme, so I'm happy to propose. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Powell, all in favour? Thank you. I'll move on to item 8 and update of recommendation from previous South scrutiny meetings. Candida, do you have an update?
I don't actually have anything to add.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay, I'm sure that will come through through the agendas and future reports. Okay, now we're on to item 9, which is revenue budget for 25-26 and the capital programme 25-26 to 29-30. So it's on your agenda paper from pages 11 to 47, and I'll hand over to Simon Ewings to introduce. Oh, Councillor Peter Paul.
Hello, good evening. Well, I think we had a very good briefing before, and so I don't propose to sort of make a lengthy introduction and give us more time to discuss.
Over to you, Simon. Anything you want to add? Okay,
We're here to happy to answer questions.
thank you. Any comments or questions?
I wasn't there for the briefings.
Yeah, you can ask the questions. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, in our 2021 budget, Chief Executive was quite strong on me as Cabinet Member of Finance then to allocate money in a transition fund, £500,000 over 2 years, at a time when we were actually trying to correct the previous situation when the council was in by cutting out money. Do we have an analysis of the actual gains made from that transition fund? I couldn't see it in the budget report, but I know there have been gains, but do we have any analysis of how much that's extra saved us or brought into the authority?
I think, just if you don't mind answering that, I think that's a very difficult question to answer because there's been that funding. There's been also all sorts of other projects that have gone on that would have improved the council's financial position. I mean, clearly, if you look back to the budget report that was considered at that point and compare it to the budget report in front of you tonight, I think the financial position of the council is in a very different place. But I think actually the exercise you're asking for is very difficult to quantify in the context of what what can you pin down to individual activities as led to the same. And clearly there's been a lot of work done by lots of people to get us to the point where the budgets are in the situation they're in.
Thank you.
If I could
Councillor Rawlings, then Powell, and then Barlow.
If I could just follow on that particular question, what would be nice actually is to see what we put away to the transformation fund, what its applications have been, what we've used the money for, and what balance we've got remaining, and perhaps what other aspirations we've got to use it. I take your point, Simon, that there's such a kaleidoscope of changes going on all around us. It's difficult to pin down exactly how much benefit came from exactly what. But I think if we understand what it's being spent on and so on, then we can make some informed judgment as to whether it's gone in the right direction. We hope and think it is. We thought it was really important to the council processes. And so I think the way in which it's being spent and the way it's anticipated to be spent as regards any residual balance would be helpful.
Any comments, Councillor Barker or Simon?
Yeah, just really to back up what Simon is saying, that obviously at the time, 4 years ago now, there were specific things that it was spent on. all of which had an objective, you know, in terms of improving the council's position, transformation funding and so on. And so, yeah, this would be a historic look back to say 4 years ago, what was that spent on, and, you know, do we think now that was money well spent? Whether that's worth the committee's time, obviously, is for you to consider.
I was just thinking if is there any opportunity to actually still invest to gain through what was the transmission fund?
I think the comment I'd make on that is, I think there's, you know, I've said it in a few sort of not in member meetings, but I think we're in danger of being about to embark on the biggest transformation project of them all. And you know, resources that might have been invested, you know, in the way you described may now have to be redirected to, you know, planning for what comes next.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, then Barlow.
Yeah, thank you. I've got quite a few sort of little questions which I'll come to, but I think for me the main thing is that at the end of what we're looking at is a budget where we are no longer running a deficit, which I mean is something to absolutely celebrate. You know, the first time since we took over the administration that we are not running we will not be running a deficit next year. So I think for me that's a demonstration that we have used our assets and our resources wisely. We have stewarded our finances exceptionally well, because otherwise we wouldn't be in that position now. So I think it would be really
a question rather than a political statement.
Yes, so this is well, I'm answering Councillor Turner. I think it is really difficult to unpick all the different strands of how we've transformed to get to where we are. But I would just like to say well done to the officers and to everybody who've presented us with such a positive budget in difficult times. So that's my first comment. And then just a few sort of odds and sods here and there. And I did go back and look at the detail that was presented to Cabinet. So there was a lot more detail, I know, in Cabinet's paper, because I was trying to look at some of the lines. And I had a few just little questions. And you may have covered these earlier, so forgive me. I noticed there is a proposal to increase the councillor grants in next year's budget, which I would certainly welcome, and I hope we would all welcome. And there's also an allocation being made for the usual capital grant scheme. I couldn't see a revenue grant scheme. Is that also covered, or is that because it's done on a multi-year basis that it's already been allocated and therefore it's kind of baked in somewhere?
Yeah, so that's already in the base budget.
Right, okay, that's good. That answers that question. And then I noticed obviously there's an awful lot of capital spend coming down. So I have one question about reliability of the forecast. You know, I think this time last year, didn't you, after the budget was passed, you and your team did a root and branch review of the capital spend to make sure that it was as accurate as it could be. And I'm just wondering, are you planning to do the same again this time? Because it does look like a huge capital spend given where we are today with this year's budget compared to where we thought we might have been. And then I'll ask one more question for now on the MTFP. I couldn't see on the MTFP where we depreciate all that capital expenditure. And I'm just curious to know how that, with the amount that we are capitalising already and over the next 5 years, where does that appear? Which line does that?
So that one's the easy one, because under the rules that govern how council accounts are prepared and what you can and cannot charge the general fund, we're not allowed to charge depreciation. So what you have instead, though, in row 43, the medium-term financial plan, is effectively the principal element of the borrowing cost. So I know that's not depreciation, albeit that actually it's calculated in the same way that minimum revenue provision is based on an asset's useful life. So it's almost a proxy for depreciation, if you see what I mean. So that would be the equivalent.
That was the one I thought it must be in, but it wasn't spelled out. So it's an accounting.
It's an accounting adjustment.
Adjustment, right? Yeah. Okay.
I'll move on to Councillor
so the capital review.
Oh yes. I nodded. Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it'd been answered. Before we go to any more of your questions, I'll go to Councillor Barlow, then come back to you, Councillor Barlow, and then Rawlings.
Thank you. I wonder if you could speak to the provision being put in to maintain staff levels for business as usual as well as attending to the needs of the Westminster driven local government reorganisation.
Which part of the paper? Are you referring to?
It was more of a general point about
I see, yeah.
how we're making provision for the fact there's going to be two very, just carrying on as we are, but also this whole reorganisation is going to take people away. I'm wondering how that's going to affect our services.
Well, certainly for the purposes of this budget, LGR has not been considered for the reasons that Simon explained earlier. Also because, the budget preparation started back in July, August. They're clearly at the point where the government makes a decision, there would then be a budgetary impact considered, but we don't know when that will be. Maybe the next budget cycle, maybe before then, but we don't know at this stage. So in terms of staffing, you'll see in the growth bids that are classified, sort of categorised on the appendices, there are a number of areas where departmental staffing has been reviewed or enhanced. So that's all been considered as part of the departmental review of their budgets for this coming year.
I'll just go to Councillor Rawlings, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Powell.
So very much just want to endorse the progress that's been made over the years here, and the big difference that it is to have a surplus, which we've never had in very many years. I can't remember when it might have been last. I did make the point earlier that the tax base grows by 6.1%, and that isn't explicitly built into our consideration. Just to note that if we took line 35 and applied a 6% to its final year, just the volume growth, that would be worth 1.5 million. It's not an insignificant. I'm not saying all the 1.5 million applies or that all costs are 100% variable, but it's a material number. When we look at the savings there of 500,000 that we aspire to, it is a material thing to take account of. A couple of presentational points. I was initially foxed by page 28, I think it was, when it was saying that we were having dramatic falls in planning fee income and building control fees, until I looked at it and thought about it and realised that it was an opening balance adjustment, and what it was saying was that was the situation last time, and this is reversing it. And it was, although it was red and negative and all the rest of it, it was actually good news. So just I think sometimes we could possibly make them a little bit easier to read. The other thing I would like to see is a more explicit treatment. We've got borrowing costs in on line 43, and I understand that that's the minimum revenue provision for debt repayment or notional repayment, and that it's based on various calculations like, a depot or an office or whatever. I'd like to see that really laid out so that everyone can understand and see what it is. And further to that, on page 18, I think we see at table 2 the borrowing costs recognised, and those are the gross borrowing costs, and they're actually being taken away from our treasury reserves, if you will, our investable reserves. And I think that should probably be brought out so that we see our borrowing costs, and we can see them being taken out from what would otherwise be the treasury reserve, so that we can recognise what that actually is, the impact that it has, and the fact that it has an implied interest rate cost, which we're not explicitly showing in here. We are, because we've reduced our treasury income, but I think that probably ought to be brought out explicitly so that we didn't have to hunt it down, if you will.
You want to gross it all up, basically.
I'll ask the question before Councillor Rawlings. I have to make those changes.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and it would be useful there to see what the rates of return we're assuming are.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlings.
Thank you.
I'll go to Councillor Powell, Turner, Morgan, and Barlow.
Thank you. And again, you may well have covered this and you've just touched on it. I just wonder if you could, for my benefit, please, Simon, the planning income, the fact the anticipated shortfall in building control shown as a big red negative. is not a big red negative.
It's a good news.
It's good news. It's a reversal of a previous assumption about future reductions.
Yep.
And therefore, on that basis, has that then taken any account of government proposals to allow councils to set their own planning fees? Or is this is or is this done on an as-is basis?
It's done on an as-is basis, and I still don't think we have full clarity on setting our own fees and sort of all the impacts that would have at this stage.
Right.
So
So
it's not as is.
so no work has been done, even if we haven't yet got clarity from government. Do we know if there's a deficit, if there's a shortfall, are our fees set to a level that we do recover our costs? Or is there scope for us to actually increase our costs if we're given that capability?
I couldn't answer that off the top of my head, I'm afraid. We'd have to take that away. So I've got the
Do you
details.
mind, yeah, ask the planning team? I'd just be
Yeah.
interested to have that, to know if there's an opportunity there to.
Would you be able to get that answer by next full council meeting?
I mean, clearly, if they've done the work, yes. If they haven't done the work, I think
It isn't so much about how much, it's like, have we done the work or could we do the work? Yeah.
Might always be an email.
Or it could be,
Yeah.
otherwise it could just be an email then.
Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, you touched on it in the briefing. I think it's called Section 24 legislation, which prevents councils in the light of a local government reorganisation, suddenly spending on projects. Or could I be assured that none of the projects in our capital plan would fall foul of that government legislation?
I don't think we can give that assurance tonight, David. I mean, I think what we would have to do is, once we understand what our direction of travel is and what the rules of the game are. I mean, clearly up till now, colleagues across the council have been involved in local government reorganisation elsewhere. There's been rules applied to those reorganisations, but there's no guarantee that those rules will be the rules that apply to this one. I think until we know what the timeline is and what the rules of the game would be, I don't think we can give that guarantee. I've seen Nick Bennett's on the call as monitoring officer. I don't know whether, Nick, you want to just pop in and either agree with me or tell me I'm talking rubbish.
Nick, do you want to come in?
I agree with Simon. I'm being cheeky, really. No, it's actually spot on. The rules aren't yet fully established. All we know is they will be extremely restrictive, and we will need to react to what the Secretary of State imposes. What they might impose in Oxfordshire could be different to what you'll see in Lincolnshire, and so on. So I absolutely, unfortunately, I have to agree with Simon. I don't think we can give any assurances until we know what the tram lines are that we're allowed to play within. We can't say more than we're waiting on those tram lines to be established.
If we do, when we do get the rules, will we get an update or? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry.
Yes, you can come in, Nick.
Sorry, I was going to say absolutely. As this stuff comes through, members are going to have to be these are political decisions of massive political impact. So members will be well briefed and given detailed understandings that we, as far as we can, as these things happen at each stage. As you know, your leader has been involved in most of the discussions and will also be feeding back, as well as officers feeding back on the national position. Sorry for talking across you, Chair. That was very rude of me.
No, thank you, Nick. Thank you for that clarification.
I just come back.
You want to come back on that?
What I was concerned about in particular with the new waste depot, which is going to be essential, and whether that might get caught up. But from what's just been said,
if you want to go into detail, we would have to go into confidential session on that.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Do you want us to go further, or
no? I'll
okay. Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Morgan and then Barlow.
Okay. Just coming back to the capital budget, the capital grants and revenue grants. In the current year, there was a significant underspend on capital, and there's a significant, we'll spend everything and be £1 million short in requests from the revenue, although that decision hasn't been taken yet. For next year, if the same position arises, I wonder whether any thought's been given to giving us the ability that if there is an underspend on one side, that we can transfer that money into the other side.
Councillor Barker, or you want some time?
I think Simon on the mechanics.
I was going to say that the trouble is you can only use capital money to fund capital. You're not allowed to use capital money to fund revenue. You could use revenue to fund capital. So if the situation you're describing is the capital grant scheme is undersubscribed and the revenue one is over, we are unable to switch the funding.
And that's legislative.
That's legislative.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, the second one is, second point was, if we get to the point that we have to re-look at the budget in 25-26 as a result of LGR, which I suspect we were, obviously, I'm just trying to make the point that we'll probably need to significantly consider whether we have the right level of support there for budget for staff going forward in a number of different things. We'll need to support staff going forward in a way that we probably hadn't anticipated without the government reorganisation.
Yeah, clearly LGR will introduce all sorts of considerations, but until we have the details, we can't consider it.
Hopefully, in that case, the ministry will whiz us down some extra money then.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morgan. I'll go to Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about capital spend as well. I noticed that in Wallingford there's no capital spend allocated across the whole of this time period. It's the fourth largest settlement that we have in the district, and I just wondered, given there's needs been established as well for things like a skate park and a community hall, what we can do about that. There's clear need, but no spend being allocated.
I think there has been some spend on the property that SODC own in Wallingford, which is the capital markets and the Riverside facility. But essentially, we tend to see capital spending on the things that we own or we are involved with. And it just so happens, there isn't a leisure centre in Wallingford, I guess. So there's a lot of leisure centre entries in here, but they don't happen to be in Wallingford. But yes, we are, restricted by what we, as a council, what we own and what we're involved with. For example, with SIL, our SIL strategy is very segmented, where we give SIL a proportion of SIL income directly to the county, a proportion directly to the ICB, and so on. And as a result, the proportion that's retained for SODC can only be used for SODC projects. And it's because of those limitations that, last year we introduced the SIL grant scheme to try and alleviate some of that and allow parishes, for example, to come forward with bids. We will continue that grant scheme for next year.
Another question, and
Just
then Councillor
come back on that then. What would stop us buying land and building our own provision in that way as well? So thinking about the leisure facilities that I'm talking about in one, but is that something that we can put in budget in subsequent years, or would it have to go through this SIL grant scheme?
No, clearly, if if LGR wasn't happening and the council was looking ahead and how to facilitate its leisure strategy and so on, then those would be the kind of considerations that would come into play. But given where we are, it will be for the successor authority to look at those kind of things.
So effectively, things are frozen unless we've already got them in plan.
Well, only the leisure strategy has only just been adopted, and so the point in time where we would start looking at how to implement that would be next year onwards.
Thank you, Councillor Powell.
Yeah, thanks. And just picking up on that a bit I'm assuming, because it's certainly happened in other parts, I'm sure the same is in Wallingford, that Section 106 agreements will have delivered some capital infrastructure into those communities. So I know in Benson, for example, we've got a community hall that was provided by one of the developers. So it's a community asset that wouldn't appear in any of our numbers because it doesn't belong to us. Do we maintain? Does somebody somewhere in the council maintain a list of those kinds of assets? Because in a way, it's quite good to see that, because then you do get the full picture of where development has also delivered infrastructure improvements for our communities.
Effectively, that's covered in the infrastructure funding statement that the SIL and Section 106 team pull together and is published annually. The point I would make, it's not the point I thought you were going to make, actually, Councillor Powell. I thought the point you're going to make is that obviously we've talked a lot about constraints on our own funding, but if we've got section 106 funding for specific purposes, there's no reason why that wouldn't carry on being spent. So if there was, or being distributed. So if we've collected section 106 money on behalf of a parish or in respect of a specific project, that, you know, there's a legal requirement on the council to progress that, and we will carry on progressing those until such time as we cease to be.
But in answer to my question, we do have that register, that section 106 register that comes. That's a legal requirement to publish that. So we can look at that alongside our own capital spend to get that bigger picture. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Yeah, the question on Appendix D3 on page 38 actually, but it concerns SIL and the top entry and not particular table. It's one-off money that it's basically the SIL money that we collected and we give to the county. Now, I gather that we are unusual in this council in just handing that money to the county to do as it sees fit. And in particular, I'm extremely frustrated that we get very little done in the way of provision of safe walking and cycling routes. I mean, the county proposes that you'll have 25% fewer car journeys, but unless you provide good alternatives, I can't see how that's going to come about. I think what I'm looking for is a revision of our SIL strategy, which obviously won't affect this year, but could affect the future on how that money is agreed. I mean, we still notionally apply it to county functions like highways in that particular instance, but we could commission the county to do things that we think we need here, rather than leaving the county to what looks like to us it's all spent in Oxford City, or at least not close to us here. So can we, is that a budget question or not?
It's not really a budget question. I don't know whether you want to comment on the politics side.
Yes, it's a political statement question.
Yeah.
Yeah, only to say that, so yes, we are due to review the SIL strategy. You know, in line with the fact that we've got the joint work plan going through and things like that. So yes, the SIL strategy should be reviewed off the back of that, and that will happen this year. Obviously, what the content of that review is will be up to all members and cabinet to decide as we go through that process.
Thank you. But just on that point, looking on that line, the amount, the SIL allocation to OCC 2.663 million was for this financial year, but there are no future payments included in it.
If you look at Appendix D3, you'll see the next year's one. That's all that's doing is picking up the money we've received today that's due to them. So we've made no estimate of future transfers.
That was my question. So there's zeros in these columns, but there are likely to be sums paid to them when we know what they are. Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the oddity here is that OCC take their SIL money every year, whereas the healthcare bodies have not. That's why there's that backlog of SIL healthcare, which we see 25, 26, 26. So that's not new SIL, that's the SIL which is built up.
Okay.
I see that Councillor Cooper wants to come in, then I'll go to Councillor Rawlings.
Yes, it's a little bit further on this. I mean, I presume the same sort of arguments apply to the healthcare. Can we keep the money and we decide what we would like for it?
Yeah, other councils are paying that.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Rawlings.
Similar point to Sue's, but perhaps a bit detailed. On page 42, we've got the Sustrans Phoenix Trail, which in my understanding is a pre-existing trail. So I was a bit surprised that we were putting 222 grand into that. And it may be I'm missing something, but my understanding is it pre-exists and it's good and it works. Whereas we do have an aim to have lots of new cycleways. So I was just trying to understand here, is it being extended? Is this new, or is it just a resurfacing of what's there?
It's a specific project to change or improve one part of it in terms of connectivity with the local area. And the reason that came through to us through the grant scheme. That's one of the
Okay.
proposals. And yeah, the difficulty with all the other kind of cycling projects that we're all very keen on is that they would need to come through the county, whereas Sustrans is separate from the county, so we were able to handle that through the grant scheme. I mean, if Sustrans were to propose something elsewhere, equally we could consider that.
I think even in relation to the county, at the moment, it's our local plan, it's our policy, and we should have some influence over what county come forward with, but that's another matter. Just as one small other point, we talked about the balances and showing everything. It would be nice if we also had where we've got the debt, if we were all offsetting, if we're going to have this notional allowance, then we should be showing that offset by that and reduced by that, because the logic is it's a repayment of debt, so that should show, in my view.
Any other comments, questions? I'll take Councillor Barlow and then Councillor Turner, and then we'll go into debate.
I had a question about point 12 on page 13, which is about the investment returns. And I was curious what was behind us deciding to reinvest £360,000 in financial instruments rather than allowing that money to be used on increasing services in the current year for our residents' benefit.
Councillor Barker?
I think I'll let Simon sort of comment on specifically what that 360 is first.
So that 360 is the earnings on the council's unit trust investment, and what happens is they are, when they are earned, they are reinvested in purchasing more units. Now, council's investment in that fund is 10 million. Went through a combination of dividend earnings and growth in the value of the fund. That the value of the fund reaches 14 million. We basically claim 2 million back, and we have just done that. So although it looks as if it's being it's reinvested, but ultimately it is reclaimed, and we tend to do that we've done that several times in the last few years, and we've actually done it in the last month. So at the start of the year, the fund got to 14 million with I can't remember the exact word we use. It's not reclaim, but it's redeem. That's the word. We've redeemed 2 million, and that's obviously gone into our general fund balance. So when we make our analysis of reserves going forward, we allow for periodic realisation of those 360. So it is realised for use in services, just not in the year.
Okay, can I come back to that?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. That's very clear. And I remember at Treasury Management Strategy we talked about those unit trusts and about how they are potentially undermining our council plan because of the way we're investing in companies which cause more carbon emissions than the ones we're drawing out. So I'd just like to know I feel very uncomfortable about us doing that and continuing to reinvest. I've lost track of where we've got to with the investment strategy, but I'd urge us to, if it's here or elsewhere, to look again at that. Because it feels like we're undoing our good work by investing in organisations that actually cause more harm than we're trying to balance out.
Again, that might be a political decision.
Yeah, because you're right. I mean, I think it was joint audit and governance last year that reviewed that, and where we had work done by, was it Link? Because clearly there's also that constraint between what councils are able to do with public money, especially that's held in form of reserves, versus the kind of risks that that we might take if we're investing our own money. And so there's always that balance, which is why we need people like Link to advise what we can and can't do.
Just yes, Simon.
I was going to say the Joint Audit and Governance Committee considered Link's review in October. One of the recommendations of the committee was to have a look at alternative options for that fund. We will progress looking at that in the new financial year.
Does that answer your questions?
Just one other point on that.
One more, then I'll go to Councillor Turner.
Sorry. So I just to be clear, we can choose not to put that 360 back in though. We could choose to take it out.
I'm not entirely sure whether that's how the mechanics of the fund work, if I'm entirely honest. I mean, clearly we can redeem money at any time. We have just chosen to do that on a periodic basis. I think what I would say is whether we redeem it in the context of the way we've worked through our balances and demonstrated the use of balances at the end, we are using those 360,000 over the life of the MTFP. It's just not, in this case, it's not relevant to that year. The way it manifests is that there are blips in the use of reserves. So if you try and map through the use of reserves in one year to how the reserve movement jumps, you'll find periodically it doesn't work because there's an injection of cash from redeeming from this funding.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
we'll continue that otherwise. Thank you.
Councillor Turner, thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. My old hobby horse, refurbishing Kidmore End in Wallingford cemeteries. Now, I do realise there's an historic reason why we do this, but it is grossly unfair on all the other parishes and towns who do it themselves, and usually by the churches themselves. But the question I have is that we were due to spend £134,000 in this financial year. Will that slip, or has it been done? And the second question on that is that I see that in the financing, there's £100,000 from SIL. Is that from the SIL generated by housing in that parish and town? Or is that coming from somewhere else?
Yeah, on the SIL question, no, it's not financed to a parish. So SODC's SIL, we can allocate to projects anywhere within SODC. It's not tied to a location where a house was built or anything like that.
That begs the question, why aren't that parish and that town financing it from their own SIL generation from housing? The whole situation, I think, is grossly unfair.
Maybe a question that you need to ask at their parish meeting.
Mm.
Any other questions before going to development? I see Councillor Barlow. Anybody else? Okay, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. This may not be one that Peter, Paul, or Simon, you can answer yourselves, but I thought it was interesting for us to discuss as a group. I think it's point 68. Can come to it. Yes, the climate and ecological impact implications. It's very clear that we don't use the climate impact assessment tool for the overall looking at the budget. What intrigues me is how do we understand whether this budget is impacting on net zero ambitions in a positive or a negative way? We spend thousands of hours, quite rightly, understanding the financial implications. Makes absolute sense because we've got a statutory duty to do that. And it feels to me like that we might be making it an aggregate level decisions which are blind to climate, and yet we've declared a climate emergency. And if we really treated it as an emergency and almost imagine that it was a statutory duty to consider these impacts, what could we do differently so we actually do understand the climate impact? Because to me, this feels a dangerous game that we're playing in that way.
Sure. I'll pick that up because basically we've had a conversation with the climate team about this, because what happened, I think it was about 12 months ago, was they trialled using the climate impact assessment tool, and then they basically it was deemed a success and we went for it across the board. The problem I have with the budget report is twofold. First thing is all a budget does is allocate money for, effectively reserve money or allocate money indicatively for projects. So if you think about all the individual capital schemes in the programme, for example, the budget, the fact they're in a budget doesn't mean they're going to happen, that doesn't guarantee they'll happen. There are due processes to go through. And the process to actually go forward with a project is where you see the climate impact action tool in use in that individual decision. Mm. The scary thing, which is why I wanted to talk to the climate team about the use of the tool on the budget, is where do you stop? Because the budget represents hundreds and hundreds of budget lines of revenue spend, hundreds of lines of capital spend. What if you want, if you go to an extreme and say to actually do the climate impact assessment tool properly, it's probably a full-time job for a team of people if you go down to that level. Mm-hmm. So I think what we have here is a reflection really of the fact that the budget of itself is not where spend decisions are made. The budget provides an envelope for spend decisions, and the climate impacts assessment of those decisions is made, of those spending decisions is made when those decisions are made.
Does that answer your question?
It does and it doesn't. And I really empathise, having been in that position myself, looking at things from the government's point of view. And I would welcome us coming back to and looking at how can we do that? How can we look at things overall at this time? We had a similar discussion about the JLP when we said that we weren't using the climate impact assessment tool for the JLP, and similarly for the council plan. These are our biggest decisions that we make. And I get what you say, Simon, about the whole team spending time on it. Well, we have whole teams looking at finance, quite rightly. And if climate is as important as finance to us, then perhaps we want to think about that and at least consciously choose not to do it or otherwise. And I know it's very different to where we are today.
I'm sure Councillor Barker will take that on board next time. I'll give Councillor Morgan, and then I think we've had quite enough time on questions, and we'll go into debate. So, Councillor Morgan.
I have one question on the capital programme, and it's page 39 in policy and programmes. NPR 3 have 3 million in the current year and 3.2 million next year. Are we actually going to, I presume that the delay in the HIF decisions is responsible for not spending anywhere near that money in the current year? Will that have to be adjusted as a result?
Well, that's the Northern Perimeter Road, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, we hold that for the county to, draw down whenever they're ready.
Yeah,
we're not in control of when they decide to draw it down.
So it's set aside for them to draw down when they need to. The fact that they've been unable to spend it in the current year will have no effect on our budget. They'll take it from our funding at a different time. Because
it's effectively fully funded by government grant. Yeah. It's a very bizarre situation that the government grant was paid to us rather than direct to the county.
I'm just concerned it might affect our numbers, but it won't be.
It's just resting in
ring fence, isn't it?
Yeah, it's ring fence. It's fully funded externally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. Just before going to debate, just to remind everybody, and for the purpose of recording, I'll just read out what the recommendations are. That's Scrutiny Committee A considers and comments upon the report of the Head of Finance on the Revenue Budget 25-26 and the Capital Programme 25-26 to 29-30. And B, notes that comments in debate will be considered by the Cabinet Member for Finance in presenting the budget report to full Council on the 13th of February 2025. So that's what we're debating. So any debate, or is there anyone else want to put another comment or another recommendation?
I'd just like to thank the officers for all the work that's gone in here. There's millions of markings all over this thing and lots of questions I could have asked, but more or less I managed to get answers to them as I thought them through. And I think it is very well thought through. It is an excellent move forward year by year by year over where we came from in the 2019 budget. It is putting capital to work where it should be put to work. And it's running a tight ship, I think, in terms of the revenue spend. And yes, we're putting some money back into our communities. That feels okay to me, by and large. That seems to be the right thing to do in looking at the public domain in the round. So, in my view, this is a very good result in a complex subject, and I will be supporting it.
Councillor Rawlings.
Yeah.
Councillor Powell.
Yeah, I absolutely echo those comments. I think when we look at the budget for the immediate future, and we have some idea what we think is going to happen in the immediate future, and that's looking like a good, positive, constructive year. We know it might be derailed at any point by local government reorganisation, but we do have a business as usual mindset, I think, and we will be cracking on with what's in this. And I think this is going to deliver lots of value to our residents, and we can be proud of the way that the revenue budget has been allocated and is being spent. I think in any year, the MTFP, the 3rd to 5th years are a work of fiction. In a good year, they're a work of fiction. At the moment, Simon, I don't know how you're coping. I know you've lost even more hair over the last few weeks, but I think, you know, well done for putting together something that we can approve and that looks very robust, despite what we know is coming down the pipe at us. I'm very encouraged to see the positive approach taken to making good progress with some of our existing commitments around capital, particularly on areas like investing in social housing and affordable housing. I think we've adopted that policy as a council. We all believe in it 100%, and delighted to see that we've made space in the budget for the next year to really accelerate that programme. So that's a very good news story, and I think we'll be very proud to present that to our communities. So I'd be very much supporting the budget when it goes to full council next week, and I think Councillor Barker's heard plenty of comments around the table that he'll be able to use when presenting his paper next week.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Councillor Gregory.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to echo what others have said, really, in terms of where we've come from 5-6 years ago, when the council was running a deficit, and how officers and obviously cabinet members have managed to turn that around. And I think all credit should go to them, because I think it's yeah, it's worth celebrating. Well done.
Thank you. Anybody else? I see none. So I've read out those two recommendations. Do I have a proposer?
I'll propose them.
Councillor Rawlings, seconder. Councillor Powell, all in favour? That's been noted, and I'm sure Councillor Barker will take those on board. Thank you for your time and your assignment for your taking on the Q&A session. Thank you, and the briefing beforehand. Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. Thank you. I'll now go on to item 10, which is the council plan and the way ahead, and that's on pages 48 to 104. And do we have Councillor Casey Rehay? Yes, we have. Over to you, Sam.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Yes, so I'm very pleased to be able to bring this to scrutiny this evening. The way ahead, our council plan changed its sort of title and its subtitle, actually, from how we had it before. So this is the next 4 years, 2025 to 2029. And we've worked on this for over a year. The officers have done, I think, an excellent job of consultation, working with stakeholders, and across the board getting a really good response to our public consultation at the beginning of the year, which followed very quickly on the back of the joint local plan consultation, a very big local consultation, as you know. And we still got a pretty good response, and a pretty varied response from across the whole of the district. So I'm pleased with that. I think I'm bringing it to you as a more or less a final plan. Obviously we'll be listening to you and comments you make, but I think it gets the right balance as it stands between those high level strategic aims, setting out our principles for the next 4 to 5 years, and the specifics, so that we can then, under those specifics, be sure to get the right action plans. So as I said, it's a strategic framework. The overall objectives that the council will need to work to, the teams, the officers and the teams, and it works alongside the budget, the medium-term financial plan and the budget for this year, of course. The 5 priority areas, they're similar to what we had before. They're the climate and nature, the participation, access, accessibility and accountability, working with our communities, the homes and infrastructure that we need, and the financial stability and the innovative transformation. And you'll see that there are slightly different ways of looking at those things. We've brought in ideas of resilience and adaptation with regards to nature recovery and climate. We've brought in the sort of ethical and responsible investment with regards to finances, for just 2 examples to give you there. There will be the annual delivery plans that work underneath this this strategy. The first ones will be coming in through the democratic process this March, and then going through to council in April. And it works, I think, in the Vale. The Vale has its own council plan, and they sort of work together in the sense that they need to overlap, because of course we have our joint local development plan, but they are very distinct. They are very much this is very much a response to our local district in South Oxfordshire, and it is a response to our political priorities as an administration. So I'd welcome any input you have, or any questions that you have, and I hope that you can help us develop this for the next 4 years.
Thanks for that. Just before I ask for questions, Tim, would you like to add any comments before I do that?
Hello, Chair. No comments from me, but thanks for the invitation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, councillors? I think you stunned them, Councillor Redhead. You stunned them.
Well then.
Councillor Gregory.
Yeah, I've just got a question on the methodology of engagement. Did we look at going out via schools at all? I couldn't see it in the report. I know, I think might have mentioned that before. I have when we've done other kind of public engagement stuff, but it's always quite a good way to get to quite a big audience. I was wondering if that had been thought about at all.
Before I will ask Tim to come in with some specifics, but I will say that before that was there was a point at which we invited, if you remember, councillors to do some engagement, if possible, around this, and gave out packs and information and leaflets, etc., to councillors. And I know that particularly Councillor Philippa Rivers went out to her local school, primary school, to engage with them and spend some time. I mean, Tim can correct me, I don't think there was anything specifically that we did to engage with schools or the educational system. Am I right in that, aren't I, Tim?
Yeah, yes, so absolutely to agree with that. The invitation was there in terms of with the packs that we produced for councillors, but there wasn't a specific programme to go into schools. But as the example that's been given, I think some councillors and some others did take that opportunity to do that on their own back, in terms of to go out and engage with schools and other people in their networks as well that they normally would work with.
Yeah, and just to remind you that this was on the back of that very big joint local plan consultation. So there was, there's a limit to the capacity that the council has to engage, and even though one of our very important aims and strategic aims, as in here, is accountability and accessibility, we have to be proportionate. We have to think about how much we can actually do in terms of going out. It's not easy to engage with all schools across Oxfordshire either, or sorry, South Oxfordshire.
Yeah, true. We must have it. There must be a network through the county council though that we could tap into. I'm just wondering, just because you're relying on how good your local council is, dependent on how they're going to, how good your local councillor is, on how much you're going to get that engagement out there, I guess. I think maybe just want to consider for future engagement pieces, that's all. So
I think that, yeah, thank you.
There.
I think that's really helpful, and I think actually, because like I said, there's a capacity around how much you can do with schools. It's probably actually something that we could take forward under the action plans, in terms of keep going back and checking with young people in schools over the next period of time, because it's that sort of it's the work that the specifics, which I imagine will be more interesting to young people. I might be wrong, but actually I think we could take that back and say, is the part of this under that sort of accessibility and accountability than participation that we can use under, you know, as those action plans.
Yeah, you could get to parents as well, you see, because obviously the schools will have weekly newsletters that go out, and they'll often put things that are in my children's school does, where it'll be like, oh, fill in this survey, or this is going on. So it's just worth considering as a channel for future.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Barlow?
Thanks, Chair. I welcome the inclusion of climate change adaptation and resilience at the layers beneath the priorities. And I'd ask if it's possible for us to explicitly call out adaptation at the actual priority level as well, given I think one of the things we can do very well is draw people's attention to how important this is going to be for us, and indeed is already to us. And so having adaptation in that strategic priority level and community resilience in that way may well be a really good signal about how important it is and how we're seeing it. I think otherwise there's a danger of it still being seen at that kind of action on climate change as being a very net zero kind of thing. So I wonder what others think about that.
You want to come back on that?
Yes, I'll come back on that. Thank you. I don't understand what you're saying. You're saying that those bubbles, if you like, they're the strategy. But actually, I will push back against that, and I'll say this whole plan is the strategic aim. Underneath this comes, like I said, those particular action plans. We'll have a climate and nature action plan coming, which will go through to scrutiny and through to SEAC, of course. I don't think there's a sort of hierarchy within this plan, really. It's just further detail. And so, you know, the action on climate change is net zero, but it's also resilience and it's also adaptation and it's nature recovery. And they come together because, of course, they feed into each other. I'm not, you know, we could change some of the words at the top level. I don't think it would have very much of an impact. And I think we'd be playing around with the wording to not great benefit in my opinion. But I sort of understand what you're trying to say, but I think the whole thing is a strategic document. It's not that there's levels of priority where action on climate change is more important than, you know, working with communities for resilience, or that is the strategic level. Is that clear?
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Turner?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In theme 2, which refers to inclusion and accessibility, it makes focus on ensuring equality of access to all the services provided by the council. One of the things which concerns me is that over 60% of our residents live in rural settings, and particularly the young, if they have none of their own transport, they can't access the leisure facilities and evenings. And I'd like to think that we could give more thought, and I know it's difficult, to actually solving that problem over the next few years.
I'm not going to argue with you, David. I think I absolutely agree with you. And, you know, I was the active travel champion for South Oxfordshire for 4 years. So I absolutely agree that any sort of influence we can have on accessibility and traveling around, particularly for younger people, I would agree, and we'll take that away and think about, and I think we will be taking it away, even if you hadn't said this, and thinking about how we can put that in the action plans underneath the areas that you make that you state. I mean, it's a rural county in the rural district, sorry, in the main, isn't it? So
thank you.
Take your point.
Councillor Powell.
I can just add to what Councillor or what Sam's just said. For example, Wallingford is having an LC WIP developed at the moment, a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. Which is being led by the county council, but many of us are on the steering group working with the parishes as well, and that is absolutely designed to improve those active travel links to like home to school, home to station, and things like that. So that's happening across the district. Tame is having one as well. So, you know, I think we are helping our county colleagues to bring that better accessibility to our communities.
One else? Oh, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. On the action on climate change and nature recovery page on page 58, very helpfully got the breakdown beneath the strategic priority and then the what, why, and how boxes. A couple of things occurred to me there reading through. One is I wondered how helpful it would be for us to explicitly say that our own operations will be adapted to climate change. Again, this point about adaptation, and again, us signalling how we see importance it is, because we talk about net zero explicitly, but we don't talk about our own operations going to be adapted to climate change.
So you're talking about not the net zero capabilities or targets that we have. We're talking about how we will adapt to them. I think that's an important point, and I will take that away. Thank you.
Another one on the same page. So similarly, I've been thinking about the things again that it feels to me that if we want to be at the leading edge of this, which I think we clearly are in many ways, people talk about us. The next phase as well is for us to acknowledge our role as a council in helping with education and development when it comes to understanding how we need to adapt. And we know that there's a county adaptation plan which we're part of, which is absolutely to be welcomed. And I think there's something there that we could perhaps choose to explicitly again talk about helping communities to be resilient. And by that I mean psychologically as well as physically resilient. I read a number of really quite challenging papers from the British Red Cross. One of them called Every Time It Rains. And it was basically talking about people who, the moment it starts to rain, they really hate being in their houses because it's flooded several times, and that has a psychological impact on our communities. And in that report, it talks about local authorities should be working with their communities to develop community-led groups that have ready access to flooding experts and local decision makers. We do some of that already, it's really good. But it goes on to talk about establishing and improving community networks through participatory and place-based approaches that can help build community resilience. We do some of this really well already, we know that, and I wonder if there's a way of bringing this explicitly into action on climate change, because then we draw these threads together and we understand how these things are going to really allow our communities to prosper and survive or potentially fail. So it's a point about bringing things together more, because I think climate is going to be the thing which, as much as Sam, you said things are very equal, climate is going to be the thing that allows everything else to actually happen or not happen. I want to have a sense that makes.
Want to come back on that?
Yeah, do I want to come on? Yes, I mean, I think like I take your point. I absolutely think you've got some good points there, and I think it's important to think about psychological resilience. And I was very clear that I wanted to get in that the district council is a leader and will be leading certain things, but it doesn't mean we're going to be doing everything, because obviously the district council can't do everything. It's got statutory responsibilities that it has to see to first. So leading that and leading those community resilience things was part of what you're saying. I believe that we'll be leading in terms of resilience, whether it's psychological resilience, and that can work through ensuring that we respond quickly to, for example, flooding. There's been some, for example, we're doing that now actually, and we'll carry on doing that now. In my ward, we've had in two villages a lot of flooding, and because we have some devolved powers from the county council on flooding, actually that I'm very pleased to say that then the parish councils and the residents are very pleased with how fast we've responded to that. And I think that, as you said, shores up people's psychology. It makes them feel actually that they're being listened to, that we're having action on them, and that will carry on. So I think I take your point, but I think it is covered in what we're doing already, and it will be covered in the action plans. And hopefully, when you see the action plans, you'll be more reassured that these things are all covered.
Councillor Rawlings.
I was just going to comment. I think there have been some suggestions through SEAC that we might do some work with towns and parishes with a view to working with them and developing some stuff on climate change and biodiversity and so forth. And I'm sure stuff like flooding will come up within that in certain areas. So I think that's good. Obviously, there are some bad things or questionable things about the local government reorganisation, but one thing that will come out of it is things like flooding, which can be a bit ambiguous sometimes as to which side of the organisational border it falls on will disappear, and it will become clearer that it's all in one place, and that's probably a good thing. But my question would be, is there anything in this plan which is positively wrong and which is going to mitigate against adaptation or against working with towns and parishes? It's a living, breathing document. It's moved and it's changed along its progress, and I'm sure it will continue to do so as long as we're here, and hopefully it will survive as an exemplar beyond.
Yes, thank you. And I hope it is internally, coherent. It has to work together, and there shouldn't be any contradictions at all in it. I don't think there are, and I would be glad if you pointed any that you thought might be. But as far as I can see, it's completely coherent in itself as a whole plan, as a strategy.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One final one, and I'm not sure it's about the council plan itself, but I've noticed this on several of our reports. On page 48, the first table talks about implications, and in that implication, the climate, it says there's no climate and ecological implication, and that it doesn't quite stack up to me, because it absolutely does have them. And I was wondering, and this may be a process point, but is the way in which we use that table up front, how helpful is that when we say that this doesn't have a climate and ecological implication when it clearly does?
That's the case. Do you want to come back, or Tim?
Yeah, and I think I would refer to what we talked about earlier. I mean, what you're saying is the presentation of the report could be slightly misleading, in the sense that we will do climate and ecological assessments of the actions that come under this plan. But you're saying that it seems to be, even though we talk about climate and ecology in it, that should table at the top. So it's the presentation of it that I think you're asking about, isn't it?
Yeah, it just doesn't seem. Is the form appropriate for what we're doing? Because
I think it's the only form we've got, but I will take that away, and maybe we will look at where that sits, or maybe Mocky can look at where that sits with others.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be awkward here. I want to be really clear. We had a similar conversation about the budget, right? We've had a similar conversation about the JLP. There's something for me about how we use our climate and ecological declaration and our clear commitment to it, but how we somehow integrate that into our highest level of decision making, of which this is one of them, because we're developing our plan, so that the languaging and the process we have actually help us have really good governance. And it just feels a bit, we're learning, and I wonder how we can progress it on a bit more, so it makes a bit more sense if we look at it from the outside.
Let me just ask a process question. So if that statement, instead of saying no, had said yes, what would have then happened? Would there have been another report created?
So I think it would have to have said something like yes, but the underlying plans will be brought out in the underlying plans rather than the strategic level. So you could say something like no, not at the strategic level. And I think perhaps there's two things going on here. So you're saying how the report is presented, how it's put out, seems to contradict what we're saying in the actual body of the actual plan. But like Simon was saying earlier about the budget, this doesn't have any specific actions in it. This is a framework and gives permission for certain actions to take place in certain ways, and they have to line up with the strategic aims in this plan. And only at that stage can you say whether they have what implications, climate and ecological implications they have. So I think you're mixing two things up. You're saying, I think, get me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that maybe the presentation of the report is just a bit misleading, and maybe we can look at that. But secondly, I would say the climate tool does not work on strategy. It doesn't work. It's not meant for that. It's a calculation of very specific action, and that works at that action level, and that's where we get those the climate tool used.
I see Nick's on the screen. So Nick, do you want to come on, make a comment on this?
Annoyingly, again, the previous speaker has said pretty much what I was going to say. With I don't know why you invite me, really. But yeah, no, the equality impact elements of reports relate directly to actions. So exactly what Councillor Casey Rehay said. If it's a strategic document that's talking about, of course it will lead to issues that will impact the environment, but those issues will be carried forward in different reports that will be more operational, and that's where you'll see regularly on reports that element. That said, very happy to go away and talk with Stephen Corrigan and with the executive about exactly how the reports work and whether that still does what we want it to do. And if you wanted me to take that away, Chair, to have those conversations about that, I'd be very happy to. And well, Councillor Rowan's got his hand up, I can see.
Yeah. Certainly we'll take that on board. I see Councillor Rowan wants to make a comment.
Yeah, I've been quiet for hours, and it's not like me. I think there's a cost benefit to everything we do, and I would be reluctant to commit large chunks of very intelligent policy officer time, effectively writing a PhD on how we can do the produce a report on a strategic level document. And so it's what would be the benefit of having that, and would it be worth spending time and money to do that? If there's somebody at either Oxford University or Oxford Brookes who are willing to put their grant funding towards coming up with something, then I think we'd volunteer to be guinea pigs on it. But I wouldn't know where to start. I'm looking at Tim, and he's not chomping at the bit to do this. And so I think we've made major steps in terms of assessing each of our particular actions, and in terms of looking back over the last year and what change that has actually made to our net zero position. So I mean, Scrutiny can recommend that we go away and do this piece of work, but my argument would be that the cost benefits don't stack up in terms of what we would actually produce for the amount of officer time we'd have to commit to it.
I can see Councillor Barlow is itching to come back, so I will give him that. But we weren't recommending there's a report that needs to be done on this. We were just asking Nick to ask the question. So there's a bit of clarity there. It wasn't asking to do the work, it was actually asked the question whether it can be done. Councillor Barlow, you're itching to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I would echo that, not asking for loads of work. David, thank you for putting the point across that you did. I think I'd ask us just to look at how we respond to those questions. Because we said, yes, there are equality and diversity implications, but no, there are climate and ecological ones. I'm just curious about how we come to different conclusions when one might argue they're absolutely or both. It may be as simple as let's just check how we say yes or no, rather than going down the route of the PhDs that David is fantasizing about.
And if I could just, can I just come back one more thing on that? You know, I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy to have that, to have that conversation internally with officers about if they have come across. I mean, I know there's something called the LCAT tool that the County Council have been working with Exeter University and things like that. How much they actually will be specifically useful for this, we don't know, but it's something I would say that maybe SEAC could maybe investigate a little bit more, rather than, you know, put the emphasis back on officers and the work. If there's some sort of wider work to look at what other councils are doing, or other universities, then I think that the climate action team and the officers will be always open to that. But I'm absolutely agree with Councillor Owain. It's a cost benefit. We have to think about where we put our resources for most benefit.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, just on the cost benefit thing, and particularly with regard to physical deliverables, I'd be quite interested in getting an occasional earned value assessment of where we are. So when we actually look at what we're physically expecting to deliver over the next couple of years, actually having an occasional report back of actually we've done X% per year, that would be really helpful. I think, you know, if we've got a 5-year plan, have we actually delivered 20% in year one? And I appreciate the end of it is going to be delivered by somebody else, but I'd like, you know, if we're disappearing off the face of the earth in 3 years' time, I'd like, and we have a 5-year plan, I'd like us to think that we're 60% of the way there and be able to show that.
Yeah, and I probably did say in my introduction, but alongside this, with the performance reports will be produced in relation to the action plans that come out. We're working to make those more intelligent and more specific, and having a sort of dashboard so that they're sort of more automated as well. So there's less burden on officers, but there's actually a really good performance measurement of those action plans when they come about. And certainly we have that annual report, which will come through the democratic process. So you will be seeing some of that.
Councillor Wall, you got something?
Yeah, if that could be done on a sort of earned value basis, that would be really helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'll look into that, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I see none. Okay, just to remind everybody before we're going to debate what the recommendation is, and for the purpose of the recording, recommendation is to Cabinet to approve the council plan 25 to 29 in Appendix 1 and recommend its adoption to full council. So that's what we're debating, unless someone else has got another recommendation or anything additional. Councillor Powell.
But all I just say is that that was the recommendation to Cabinet, and Cabinet looked at it last week. So I guess we're commenting, but I think Cabinet has already decided to recommend it to.
So this is to the Cabinet member, yes.
Yeah, just to for sort of future information, I guess, isn't it really? And as we know, I mean, this is an evolving process. And are we in debate now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So I'd just like to congratulate you for producing a fantastic document and a really exciting forward plan. I know it's been a long time in the making. Seems a long time since we were having those engagement activities and roundtables and so on. But what we've got now is, and I understand it's actually been very helpful to have it tonight alongside the budget, because I think these are very much two sides of the same coin. This is what we're going to do, and the budget tells us how much we're going to spend doing it. And this is also a very clear evolution of the previous corporate plan. It sort of shows that actually we've been on the right line. So, you know, we've refined what we do and we've improved what we do. And I think this is a huge improvement on the one that we developed 4 or 5 years ago. So well done. This gives us the right level of flexibility. And I think picking up on what Councillor Barlow was saying, I was also looking at some of the wording and saying, well, we could have used a different word in that bubble, and maybe that would have been, you know, a slightly nicer, better emphasis. But actually, I think the hooks are there. You know, the hooks are there within the document that where we can say what we're going to be working on is more adaptation and resilience work, and we can put that into those annual delivery plans, rather than stressing over a particular word, which maybe we would have done differently. But I don't think that really adds tremendous value. So I think it's fabulous, and I look forward to seeing the annual delivery plans, and I look forward to seeing back here at this meeting the first performance report when we get to that stage, and seeing hopefully lots of earned value and delivery and spend of lots of money as well. Yeah. But it's really exciting. It's great. It looks fabulous. Let's hope we can do it all.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Any other councillor, committee members?
Good plan.
I see none. Just before we go to vote, Councillor Katie Ray, would you make any other comments?
I just want to say thank you for your comments and your helpful suggestions, and thank you very much to the officers team who, led by Tim, who've done, I think, a really great job on this and come back and forth an awful lot to get it right. So yeah, we'll see. And thank you for your comments.
Do we have a proposal? I think what we're doing here is actually putting our comments and feedback to the cabinet member who obviously has been diligently listening to our comments and taking notes. So do I have a proposer? Councillor Powell, a seconder. Councillor Morgan, all in favour? Thank you very much. And thank you for that. Thank you, and Councillor Katie Ray and also Tim. Thank you very much. Now on to final item on the agenda, which is item 11, scrutiny review actions, a nomination to task and finish group, and that's on pages 105 to 107. So I think this is going to be Nick, our head of legal services, to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and speak less on this than I have on previous items. So last year, the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny carried out a survey of members and officers and wrote a report, which members of this committee will recall. It was brought to you previously. This reflected a perception from some scrutiny members that it could be stronger, and a wish to obtain an external informed viewpoint about what the strengths and indeed weaknesses or development points for this committee are. The next stage of that process of improvement is to have members review that evidence and, more importantly, develop a suite of recommendations how scrutiny can take forward some or all of those recommendation points, plus any other recommendations that task and finish group chooses to make. The appointees today will complete the team with 2 members to form 6 scrutiny members into a joint task and finish group. Chair, that group will be tasked through the Joint Scrutiny Committee with terms of reference effectively to carry out that review and to consider the report and take it forwards. Now, tomorrow a pack, assuming that happens, which I'm sure it will, tomorrow a pack will go out to that group who will then do some preparatory research, reading that and following up some of the links that will be provided. And then in a short number of weeks, they will then meet and interrogate the previous external reviewer to sort of test their thinking, I suppose. Then there'll be at least 2 further sessions, one facilitated discussion with the scrutiny officer, Adriana, and myself, and then we will then write up the findings of the task and finish group, and then do a follow-up to ensure those recommendations are captured properly and fine-tune it under the direction of that panel. The task and finish group will then report back to all 3 scrutiny committees, and that's important because this one of the recommendations you remember from the report is that there should be a consistency in approach between the 3 committees to the benefit of all. And then going from there, there is a probability that you will then proceed to report on to full council as an individual scrutiny committee. Because there's the potential that those recommendations will include steps which might need amendment to your own terms of reference. Chair, I've tried to go through it quickly because I appreciate everyone's going to be overstimulated by the previous budget reports. But obviously I'm here if there are any questions that I can help you or your committee with.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you for that introduction and comprehensive summary. Any questions? Councillor Rawley.
I mean, it's more of a statement, but I think this is a positive way forward. I think that the task and finish group is a good approach. I was interested in some of the comments in the report and the thought of commissioning some research and stuff. through this group. Obviously not to be abused or overdone, but I think it could be quite a focused way of addressing some concerns and issues. So yeah, I'm supportive.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question, perhaps for Nick. What's your timeline on this whole project, Nick?
I think it's going to be Candida's the best person to assist you with that, councillor, because she's been doing all the work behind the scenes. I just take the credit.
Well, we do have an initial meeting with Ian Parry from CFGS. That's already in the diary later on in February. And then we're aiming to probably have a report ready in July.
Oh, soon as
That's
that. Okay, well, great.
That's the timeline at the moment. We'll see how we go.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Ward?
Just a technical question. Are we nominating the actual 2 members tonight? In which case, you want somebody else to sit there whilst we nominate?
Yes, we are going to nominate 2 people today, and at the moment, so far, there's been nominations of Councillor Rawlings and myself, but obviously I will not be voting on that part. So someone will have to propose that, or
I suppose Councillor Khan and Councillor Rawlings are our 2 representatives on this. Shall we vote?
Shall we vote?
Right. All in favour?
Do we know who the other representatives are?
Hopefully, Councillor Ali just listening.
Yes, so for joint
We're
scrutiny,
giving 2 men.
well,
I just want to make sure that there's some diversity.
so Vale Scrutiny have put forward, I believe it's Councillor Debbie Hallett and Catherine Foxall, and then for joint, I believe it's Stefan Gavrishek and Ron Batstone, I believe. Off the top of my head,
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Well, you've had the vote. And any debate? Okay, that's fine. So it's been noted that Councillor Rawlings and myself will be the 2 nominations. So we'll look forward to receiving your email tomorrow, Nick. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for all your contributions. And at 8:45, I close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Can now turn off. Thank you.
Susie.